We've been doing this now a few weeks on Friday mornings. I got to ask what the name of this is. We don't really have a name for it yet, but it's been fun on Fridays, 9 o'clock hour, to bring in some folks from around town who are interesting, names that all of you are going to know and have something to say. So let's say hi.
What am I doing here?
Well,
what is wrong with you?
Introducing himself, okay. Frank Boal. He needs no introduction. Of course, sports anchor in town for how many years? What, 30? Right?
Yeah, I think I've been in broadcasting for 42. I got here in 81. Okay. And I still do radio once a week just for a short period of time, but for a long time. So I'm still doing it. So it's fun.
Frank Boal, of course, doesn't need much of an introduction in this town. And he's also doing, we'll get to this, but he's doing a podcast now that's called There's Just Something About Kansas City, Conversations with Frank Boal. And, you know, you might think of Frank and think of sports, but Frank, I'm looking at some of the people you've had on and will have on. And, yes, you know, you've had on folks like Kevin Harlan, big sports broadcaster. Of course, he's here in town. Kathy Nelson, we all know her as the CEO of the KC Sports Commission. But you're talking to a lot of other people as well. And tell us some of those folks.
Yeah, it was just and I thought this was my wife's idea. Okay,
how about that?
And it was.
Did she want to get you out of the house? Is that what it was about?
Duh. so the deal was I retire and I'm underfoot. And she has had this idea, though, for about 4 or 5 years. We'd go to all these events, and sometimes I'd be emceeing, and I wouldn't be with her, and she'd be sitting just talking to people. And she's very outgoing, and she is easy to get to know. And so she talked to all these people, and I think it was Bobby Bell a few years ago, the great chief. She was talking to him. She said, "Hey, Bobby, you're from North Carolina originally. You went to the University of Minnesota. You played for the Chiefs, of course, and you were here. But you could live anywhere in the world. You could live anywhere in the United States, go to Florida or go to Arizona or whatever. But you stay here. Why?" And he said, there's just something about Kansas City. And that stuck with her. And then anytime she gets into conversations with people, she talks about Kansas City and why they're there. Tom Watson, George Brett's from Southern California. He could have gone back or gone to Arizona. And I know he lives part of the year in Arizona, but he makes his permanent home here. Tommy Watson, et cetera. And she asked them all, she said, why do you stay here? And they all say, it all comes down to, there's just something about Kansas City. So I told her, she said, why don't we do a podcast here? This was morphing in her mind. She had this pot stirring in her mind. And she said, and why don't you do the interviews? And I said, nobody wants to talk to me. I said, what do you?
Come on.
I said, they're so sick of me after being on the air for so many years. So she finally dragged me into it. And I said, well, people right away are going to think this is going to be all sports. Yeah. Because I did sports forever, which would be natural. And she said, no, we're going to do this with every diverse person you can think of here, business leader, business owners, team owners, former mayors. We don't get into politics, so to speak, but we get in, we've talked to Kay Barnes and Sly James. I know you have the current mayor, Quentin Lucas, on every week. But we've talked to people like George Guastello at Union Station, Matt Naylor, who was just named the Outstanding Kansas Citian of the Year. He is the president and general and CEO of the World War I Museum and Memorial, and he has done and he's an Australian.
Yeah. He's a good guy.
He's a great guy.
Yeah.
Andy Rieger from Rieger and Company, right?
There you
go. Keith Bradley from Made in Kansas City. Got Mick Haverty from KC Southern. Garozzo.
Okay.
You got to have Garozzo on, okay?
Yeah.
At least he might bring in some food.
Well, now you got to get Jasper on after that.
Jasper.
All right.
Jasper's
you got to take
on the
care
list.
of our man Jasper. That's great.
And I even had Brad Bergman and Doug Frost. Brad Bergman is Midwest Trust, okay? He founded Midwest Trust. Doug Frost is a master sommelier. He's only one of 3 in the entire world. And the 2 of these guys have teamed up, and they have the Bourgmont Winery, which is 199th and Quivira. They have Les Bourgeois, which is down in Rocheport. Okay. And they have Echo Lands, which is up in Walla Walla, Washington area. But here's 2 guys, Doug Frost and this guy who had a trust company, collaborated and are doing all these great things with wine across the country and right here in Kansas City. So we've had so many people. I just talked to Cliff Illig yesterday. and that'll be coming up as we drop more episodes. But I just talked to Cliff yesterday. That story about Cerner, and how he,
one of the founders,
he was one of the co-founders with Neil Patterson and I think it was Doug Gorup. I'm sorry. They founded that company, and they did it at a picnic table in Luce Park.
That's amazing.
They were sitting studying for a CPA, and they came up with this idea, and it became Cerner.
It's a really cool concept. There's just something about Kansas City. I mean, that's in many ways your story. You and I share the same alma mater, Villanova.
Right.
You think Kansas City.
All the Kansas fans just,
yeah, I know. Well, you know what? When you blow them out, well, I guess they got us last time around. They got us last time. But we got them, in 2018, I guess it was.
Yeah.
You go to Villanova, where I went. You come out to Kansas City. You think it's maybe a stop on your broadcasting journey. Mm-hmm. And here you are, 30-some-odd years later, and it's home for you. And, I've raised both my girls here. We have a third one coming, and it's home for us now. And you don't realize it till you get here.
Yeah, and I think sometimes we have a little bit of a chip on our shoulder and a little bit of thin skin when it comes to Kansas City, because everybody calls it flyover country, and everybody sort of, I don't know why you'd be envious of St. Louis, but you may be envious of St. Louis.
I'm not.
Or Chicago or Dallas or somewhere like that. And they sort of, Kansas City. And all my friends from back east were the same way until they came to visit. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden they go, wow, you guys really got something going here. And for me, it was a stopover for me. I was in Green Bay before I got here. And that's where I met Kevin Harlan, by the way. And he was a ball boy at that time. That's how far he's come. His dad was the president and general manager of the Packers. But came to Kansas City, and I was trying to work my way back east. I was maybe Pittsburgh, which is my hometown, Philadelphia, where I went to school. There was this new thing called ESPN, which sort of was piquing everybody's interest. And every time I got a job offer, I always tell this story. There's a guy named Craig Roberts. He was the news director. He was the sports director at the NBC affiliate in Houston, Texas. And he and I had exchanged films and done all this stuff with the Chiefs and the Oilers. And any other time we had to cross paths, I'd call him. I'd see him certain times during the year, and we became pretty good friends. I'd call him on the phone, and I'd say, hey, Craig, I just got an offer from my old hometown, Pittsburgh. He said, you know what? Nobody in Pittsburgh knows who the hell you are. Why would you go back to Pittsburgh? And then I call him a couple years later. Hey, I just got a job in Philly, which is one of the biggest markets in the country. He said, they threw snowballs at Santa Claus, right? They booed Santa Claus. I said, you know what? You might. He said, are you happy? And I said, yeah. He said, hang up the phone, Frank. You're in great shape. Just keep right on going.
That's great advice.
So it was great. Yeah, it was wonderful advice for me. And and after a while, I just stopped looking for other jobs, other places, just stayed here.
Frank
and I
Boal.
was blessed.
Yeah. And by the way, kids?
Yeah, 5.
Okay. So a great place to raise them, obviously.
Yes, absolutely.
You love that.
Between my wife and I, we have 10.
Wow.
Okay, yeah. And they all my kids except for one, my oldest, were born here in Kansas City, St. Luke's Hospital.
How about that?
As a matter of fact, yeah.
That's great. Frank Boal is joining us on KCMO Talk Radio. It's great to have him here in the studio. Frank, let's just I've been dying to get your thoughts here on the Royals and I don't want to say it's necessarily a fiasco right now, but there certainly is not a lot of clarity around what their plans are. What do you make of what the last year has looked like for this team?
Well, I think, there's so many layers to this, okay? When John Sherman bought the team, and he's a majority owner, but he has 19 or 20 other guys are on that list. Including Patrick Mahomes. There's a lot of guys. That doesn't matter, but COVID hits. Timing is just absolutely abysmal. And then the team does not do well. And then you're right out of the chute, you want a new ballpark. And I think all that has avalanched into where we are today, especially when I think it was last week, right? Was it last Friday? They came out with, or maybe it was just this week, whenever it was, came out with, all of a sudden.
Yes, this week. Yep.
Now we have been exploring the possibility of a third site, which was an original site to begin with. At least that was one of the possibilities. They'd explored, I think, 20 sites here in the Kansas City metropolitan area to put a new ballpark for the Royals, none of which I don't think were the Truman Sports Complex. So you get into this situation, they immediately take Kansas off the list, the state of Kansas off the list, Western Wyandotte County, or wherever else they were looking over there, which I thought was a mistake. Because if you are in his position, you need all the leverage you can get with Jackson County, Clay County, wherever else.
State of Missouri.
State of Missouri, whomever else you're doing it. Because there's a lot of tax revenue here to be lost.
Yeah.
So when he took that off, I thought, okay, that's positive. It's going downtown. I mean, okay, it's going to be downtown, most likely on the east side there. And then all of a sudden now Frank White and, Kansas City Council digging their heels in. Clay County comes on board and goes, hey, we'd really like them up here. We got a spot. It's a bigger footprint than the Eastern Jackson County footprint is. We can put the ballpark village in here, can do everything you wanted. Our problem is, will our voters say yes with a new tax situation in Clay County?
Yeah.
So you have to say, and I'm not sure they can or would be able to fund it.
But what about just the concept that in baseball, even Rob Manfred came here a few months ago, and he's like, hey, this is the new model. We build a ballpark. We have an entertainment district. We make money from the booze, the restaurants. We then fund the teams in the smaller markets. If they're looking at this site, the old Kansas City Star printing press, it's only 5 acres. The East Village is 20 acres. North KC is 90. There's no room for any of that stuff, which tells me maybe they don't need the entertainment district, and maybe this is just about a new ballpark.
It's right across the highway.
Yeah.
The entertainment district for them
Power and
is
Light.
right across the highway. It's a Power and Light. Walk across the bridge, go to the ballpark. You don't have to get in your car again.
Yeah.
Just walk out of the ballpark, wherever it is, however, of course, it's going to be a little bigger than you think. And then just walk across the bridge, and there's Power and Light. It really enhances Power and Light because now you have even more dates that you can have people down there. And if you have a big concert on a day, you can have a daytime ball game instead of a nighttime. You can double header it downtown. You can go and be there all day.
But then a lot of people are going to say, then just stay where you are. We love it out there. We love the complex. We love the K.
I'm not sure if they haven't blown that up because you have not heard one word from the Chiefs except to say we're waiting on the Royals. Because the Chiefs can't make any decisions, really. I'm sure they've made some decisions because they're always thinking ahead about, okay, what do we do? They're going downtown, and I'm sure that is all. They have a master plan of some kind, okay? They're way out in front of this, way further than we think they are. And they are going, okay, the Royals leave. We're going to build a new stadium right where the Royals are. We're going to knock down the K. We're going to build a new stadium there. While we're building it, we've got Arrowhead, and we'll play at Arrowhead. And it's going to, cut down a parking a little bit, but that's just the way it's going to have to happen. They did this in Denver when they knocked down the Erector set and built the new stadium. They were side by side, and they did one while they were playing in the other. And then the Chiefs at that point, after the new stadium is built, knock Arrowhead down, and now we have a football-related, be a lot like New England. The Patriots have. And remember, New England is 40 miles out of town.
Yeah.
They're in Foxborough.
It's not in Boston. Yeah.
It's not in Boston. So the Chiefs could use their leverage of, we'll go to Wyandotte County. We'll go to Kansas if we aren't going to get what we want. They can use that kind of leverage, or we're going to build a football-related type thing. We'll have our own Hall of Fame. We'll move it out of the new Arrowhead, and we'll make it its own standalone building like they have in Green Bay, and we'll do it that way. And then we'll have bars and restaurants or whatever. But in Foxborough, the place is dead.
Yeah.
Unless New England's playing football there.
Well, that's the thing.
That place is dead. Yeah.
They want to get more concerts, but it's still going to be busy 8 or 9 Sundays a year. I mean, that's kind of it.
That's just the way it is, yeah.
So, all right. As you think about your 30-plus years in this town on the sports anchor side, is there a Chief story that stands out to Frank Boal?
Oh, gosh.
Give me your best or one of your best. I hate to put you on the spot here, but there's got to be. Or maybe.
Now, remember, I was not doing day to day during the Super Bowl runs with Patrick Mahomes.
Correct.
Okay?
Yeah.
I was out when Andy and Mahomes were just starting to make their stamp in KC. So I'm back to, Marty or whatever.
Yeah, well, those are classics.
Yeah, sure. The AFC Championship game, the Joe Montana thing here was huge. Maybe the little kid up in River Falls, Wisconsin, who was waiting to get a Joe Montana autograph. He slipped away from his parents. He slid underneath a car, that was parked in the little cul-de-sac where the Chiefs players would come in and the buses would come in and drop them off and they'd get out, or they'd walk in after lunch. He slid under a car, and was looking from underneath the car to see where Joe Montana was. He saw Joe Montana, and he slips out from underneath the car, and as he does so, the car pulls away from the curb. So the kid jumps up, and everybody about fainted from the fact this little kid had slid underneath this car and almost got run over to try to get a Joe Montana.
Oh, my goodness. So what about, I got a couple minutes here, but the Royals 85 versus 15.
Oh, God, it was great.
How do you compare those two?
It was similar. The Royals had the premier baseball player at that time in George Brett. Okay, the Royals had a bunch of players who became very well known because of those runs, but they didn't have anyone like him except maybe Salvador Perez, okay, who is going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer as well. Mm-hmm. But George Brett was very, very singular at that time. Salvador was. He was the leader of that team as well. So they were very similar from that aspect, and very similar that they thought they can't. They're not going to beat Toronto, mm-hmm. and okay, they're not going to beat St. Louis, and they were down 3-1 in both of those series. They were down 3-1 and came back to win 4-3. Mm-hmm. And it was those runs were incredible. And the train to and from St. Louis to cover the team instead of flying to and from St. Louis, the media took the trains and the fans took the train, which was really cool.
That might have been quite a party.
That was really cool.
Oh, my goodness.
You talk about the dining car. They had about 14 dining cars on those trains.
So were they really booze cars?
Oh, gosh, yes. That's all it was. Are you kidding me? Who wants to eat?
Frank Boal in studio. His podcast, There's Just Something About Kansas City. It's not just sports figures. It's business leaders in this community. And it's folks who ultimately have chosen, for one reason or another, to make this their home. And I'll be checking it out, Frank. I think it's a fascinating topic. I think we've all grown, whether we're transplants or born and bred here, to love this community. And I love the concept.
Yeah, and just thank you. And just to let you know, it's a top 50 places to visit by Travel and Leisure, and it's top 10 on Lonely Planet. Your Kansas City metro area on those two this year, top 50, top 10.
Very good stuff. I love it. Frank, thanks you for being here.
Buddy. Thanks for giving me a little plug there.
Absolutely. That's what we're here for. Frank Boal, it is great to have him in the studio on KCMO Talk Radio, now in the FM at 95.7.